Manhunt is a TV show which aired on the Discovery Channel for American viewers and Netflix for those of the international market back in 2017. The series depicts a fictional account about the FBI's hunt for the Unabomber in the 1990s. The name Unabomber came from the FBI using it initially as a way to identify the case due to him being the University and Airline bomber. When the media caught wind of this name, they proceeded to call him it repeatedly, and the name then ended up hitting the masses. The series stars Sam Worthington and Paul Bettany. They play FBI profiler Jim Fitzgerald and Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. This show was a good watch, and as someone who knew effectively nothing about the Unabomber before sitting down to watch it, it was a good way to spend 6-7 hours, getting educated and seeing a good TV show along the way. I thought the show was enjoyable for someone who didn't know much about the Unabomber, and was a great way to get knowledge in a format that I found to be interactive. But if I knew about the case, I do not think I would have enjoyed the show as much as I did. I found myself moving from episode to episode at a rather quick pace for a show that the ending is already known and depicted in the first episode. But when it comes to the actual breakdown, we need to take a look a little bit deeper. This show, like many others that I've come to notice when I go to make a review about them, are really only about 2 or 3 characters, unless it's an ensemble show. By that, I mean that while this show has a rather large cast, it completely pivots around Worthington and Bettany. No other member of this cast has much of an effect, nor do you think about them in the long term. As such, I'm only going to focus on these 2. Worthington did a solid job in having you care for him from the off and wanting to know and how the story was going to go for his character. As we know from early on, the Unabomber is caught, and if you knew the story previously, of course you already knew this. Due to this, we needed to be sold on the person who was hunting them and how they got there. We also need to be engrossed in everything that happens after the capture. We're intrigued from the off, and throughout the show's 8-episode run, Worthington is able to sell us as being someone who wants to make a positive difference with his work and becoming obsessed within that. We're able to see his range when it comes to wanting to hunt Bettany, while simultaneously admiring what he stands for and his opinions, causing a conflict between the 2 sides of himself. Bettany had to strike up a balance between being a deranged killer and someone who was hurt in adolescence, to the point that you need to be able to pinpoint the reason for these horrendous actions he is taking, and how the events he suffered go on to shape the man that he became, while also portraying a living person. More so than Worthington, but we'll get onto that in a little bit. The freedom that Bettany had was severely limiting due to the fact that he had to play the role with more restraint than perhaps one may think of when they think about this, while also needing to fully believe in the Unabomber's manifesto, as if it was indeed his own concoction in the first place. The actors had a strong connection which was needed due to how the story the writers went with evolved from the beginning towards the end. But if I was to compare them, I feel like Worthington came out the better of the 2. The only problem with saying that is I do not have a metric that I used, but just more so a good feeling and when I think back on key scenes. Bettany was powerful when he needed to be, but overall Worthington was the more consistent out of the pair. Due to the show being based on a real life case, they did what they could to keep it as historically accurate as possible, but in saying all that, not everything can of course be perfect. This caused some things to be taken out of context and repurposed in a way that the public were notified after the fact. There was a former agent involved in the investigation who criticised the writers for the show. Due to this is why I feel Worthington perhaps had an easier job of portrayal than Bettany, as what they ended up doing was turning a minor member of the investigation staff into the star player who figured it all out. To be fair, what he is saying does look to be fairly accurate, as it does make it look as if Worthington solved the whole investigation himself, which of course wasn't the case. But when we look a little bit further, Fitzgerald never actually met Kaczynski, wasn't in Lincoln for his arrest, nor did he ever take much part in the search of Kaczynski's cabin, and if they ever did meet, he wouldn't have even been able to interview him. Fitzgerald himself has said that the show is in the high 80 percentile of accuracy, but the character based on his was basically a composite. And Fitzgerald did go on to say that he was meant to interview Kaczynski back in 2007, but Ted went on to change his mind on the matter, and a smaller change that took place was that the trial in the show was in California, but in reality it was in Montana. Considering this show was based in the 1990s, which crazily is 30 years ago now, I think it is important for anyone watching the show to be able to become immersed in the time period that they're looking at. The show managed to do this in subtle ways throughout its arc, between the pages for contacting one another, the clothes that everyone wore, the manner in which the letters were being sent by Bettany, and the search for him at the newsstand. Could you imagine having to get every available FBI field unit now to scope out a newsstand when you could probably just point a drone at it and it'd be more effective? The moment that I came to really appreciate the show regarding its era was a small but subtle one. When Worthington left his kids at the cinema to go to the office for a fax, his wife comes looking for him. Due to not having phones, it's not like she could give him a quick call and ask what's going on. You're able to see the strain that the case is putting on their marriage, as they're not able to be in contact with one another too often. And his often lost track of time shows that it was quite likely going to happen in this kind of era, but currently where we're aware of our time and what anyone is doing, pretty much 99.9% of the time, that would never happen. We all know how the story was going to end, so in this type of scenario, it's not as if the writers could conjure up a different ending for Kaczynski. So, did they maybe do it justice? I think the story itself did unfold quite well. From beginning to end, it did keep us encapsulated and interested in seeing the visual side as to what went on, because you could read it all on Wikipedia in maybe 45 minutes, but you're investing 6 or 7 hours into a show, and they definitely made that worthwhile, at least in my opinion.